We are trying to mention that we are partners who traditionally exported a lot to the European market. And we have to talk about the fast and full integration of Ukraine in all the markets. We are one of the biggest agrarian producers in the region, so for sure we are a serious competitor.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center, an NGO Euro-Atlantic course, and I'm your host, Myroslava Yaremkiv. The openness of trade between Ukraine and the European Union and integration into the EU internal market is the key to the preservation of the Ukrainian economy in war conditions and rapid economic recovery. And while the political discussions regarding the EU accession continue, Ukraine is working on the systemic economic integration within the EU, which is the basis of all integration processes on the continent. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. The consequences of Russian aggression against Ukraine continue to affect agricultural production in EU countries, which, together with other factors, high summer temperatures and winter drought, led to high food inflation and a change in the structure of consumption in European countries. Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine, Markiyan Dmytrasevych, believes that Ukraine, as a large agricultural country and a reliable partner of the EU, can help establish a mutually beneficial process of trade that can prevent food price inflation in the EU. Let's take a listen.
It is obvious that negotiations about the agrarian part will be, in our opinion, the most difficult in the process of our entrance to the European Union. We already saw that in practice with the recent events that are happening with our neighboring countries. Nevertheless, right now, already, we are trying to conduct negotiations with the neighboring countries, with the Bulgaria, but also in the framework of negotiations with the European Commission, as it is provisioned for by the Association Agreement and legislation of the European Union. And it is clear that Ukraine, as a big agrarian country with a reputation of a big agrarian country and big exporter, in the eyes of our neighboring farmers who are working in the European Union, are considered to some extent as a threat, but nevertheless, European Union had already experience of such countries as Romania, Hungary, and Poland that entered EU, and nothing critical happened. Everything became normal, and the usual trade continued. Nevertheless, we need to understand that the reason of such, let us say so, of such being careful from the side of European farmers, it's the war. And actually is the fact that you mentioned in your study, this is the break of the logistics chain. Because even before war, we were exporting a lot to the EU. We were exporting agrarian products. Mainly the export was via our marine ports. And therefore, for example, Polish farmer haven't seen the vehicles with Ukrainian grain in front of their house, so to say, on the road. And it was simpler for them. They simply did not feel that under the conditions of what was happening during the previous year on the agrarian markets, again, after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the growth of price, then stabilization of price, which actually remained on the high level at the beginning of 2023, after the reports and prognosis of Brazil, this price went down on all the world markets, and it was felt by Polish farmers as well. But as far as Polish farmers, they see the vehicles with Ukrainian grain on their roads. Unfortunately, this situation happened when psychologically this factor worked. And in addition to that, also we held the elections in Poland in autumn. So that is why we have this situation, but we are cooperating with the European Commission in order to show with numbers, not with the psychology or emotions, to show with numbers that nothing extraordinary happened. And actually, to a great extent, our neighboring countries, neighboring EU countries, just won even from this cooperation, especially their processing industry, and Poland, who exported actually the record number and also amount of agrarian products, the processing products. And in addition to that, the Hungary directly confirms that Ukrainian corn, under the conditions of last year, it just saved their agrarian industry. So under the framework of your study, we are doing and we are trying to mention that we are partners who traditionally exported a lot to the European market. And it is clear that under the conditions of war and under the conditions of blockade of our marine ports, this export achieved its peak. Nevertheless, it was a winning situation also for the agrarian sector of our neighboring countries. Therefore, one more time, I indeed agree with the thesis that was mentioned in the study about the positioning of Ukraine as a partner in agrarian field. Now, as for the implementation of legislation, you know that in spite of war, in spite of the difficulties that we faced during the year of war, indeed, we made some progress under our association agreement obligations, and now we are going beyond only the association agreement, which is actually 1/3 of European acquis. Now we are making screening in order to understand the whole amount of legislation of the European Union, which we will need to implement or harmonize with also in agrarian field. Now we are switching to developing institutional mechanisms that are necessary in order to implement the common agricultural policy of the European Union as certain agencies. And these are payout agencies, and it was also mentioned in the report for the Commission. We are also making our agrarian policy closer to European agrarian policy. And according to the association agreement, we start working on what was mentioned by you as well, that under the conditions of martial law and the reconstruction after the war, we won't be able to take all the burden of the obligations of, for example, like the Green Deal or implementation of all the standards of the European Union at the same time in one moment. For such things, we will develop and we will offer from the side of Ukraine some transitional periods for the implementation, and for some things, for example, the well-being of animals, these things will acquire additional costs from our producers. And in order to do that, we will ask for some support from the European Union, the support for such producers.
Thanks to the EU's decision to apply autonomous trade measures in the form of the abolition of all customs duties, the agreement on road transport, and the effective implementation of logistical solidarity routes, Ukraine was able to preserve trade with the European Union. The EU stayed as our main and largest trade partner with a share of more than 55% in trade turnover for 2022. Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine Taras Kachka will talk about some challenges on the path to Ukraine's integration into the EU internal market.
Before talking about some positive things, we need to understand whether the association agreement works in general, because today it doesn't. And it also impacts other directions, because we did a lot also with the roaming market and services. We did a lot also in terms of understanding of integration to internal market. The same was done in energy sector. And it is obvious that we will have to resolve that legal problem which is created by the decisions of both like national governments and European Commission. We don't have to forget the fact that the limitation or the restriction that was offered by European Commission, it does not correspond to the association agreement at all. That is, this is a pretty obvious loss for all the processes that are happening for us. Now we see the signals about the sanitary and phytosanitary, that as of today in the Polish Republic, there is really like some bad things going on related to Ukrainian products, and the procedures that we were implementing for a long time, they are used against us in a really not good manner. And actually it is obvious that now we have to spend quite a lot of time in order to come back to that normal logics. And we have a lot of plans, because in addition to roaming, in addition to ACA agreement, we have a lot of other priorities on public procurement, on further integration, in the public procurement, and again, sanitary and phytosanitary, on expanding the cooperation and technical regulations. And here also we need to understand what can help us in these spheres, what can help us cope with this problem. First of all, to come back to procedures as soon as possible, come back to the normal work under the association agreement. And I hope that this understanding from the EU side will come and is coming. And secondly, we have to stop talking or speaking with the categories of continuing these transition periods, even in most difficult fields, even in agriculture. We need right now to be integrated in the most difficult obligations, because it's not only about agriculture. We also see the same in the industry, that the easiest way of integration to the EU is actually to say that we will perform certain obligation in 5, 10, or 7 years. Unfortunately, this gives space for such bad things that we are seeing right now in the agriculture market. So we need to step away from the logic of longer transitional periods, and we have to talk about the fast and full integration of Ukraine in all the markets. And actually, we need to change, to go deeper into these key acquis. But in addition to self-screening, we also have to understand that we have the process under the association agreement about the opportunity of integration in the field of financial services. What we saw in the beginning of the year, when usually the field of financial services, in comparison to other services, it was not the highest priority. But now we see that from the side of European Commission, they are interested in establishing the apps and so on. So even such procedural things, they allow us discuss seriously how we can be integrated right now. So the main accent has to be is like having most serious approach in order to integrate the markets that we can integrate under the association agreement, in order not to postpone the problematic things. We have to use them positively. And I hope that via this discussion and good discussion that we have about like agrarian things, we won't come to antagonism or some parallel existence, but we will come to integration, because understanding is clear. At the time when Poland is blocking import, Spain is suffering from some weather problems, from some drought, And I don't think that the whole world will suffer from the lack of their certain food, but they will suffer if jamon won't be available, and they need our corn to do that. And we have to find solution to such situations, not from the point of view who's guilty and who's not, because we see that here Poland is on that side, but we have to find the solution that will allow us to develop maximally our agriculture and also Spanish, or for example, our metal production, and also in some other countries. So from all the sides, from the sides of the studies and from the sides of governmental work, we have to pay accent to solving problems here and now and not using long transitional periods.
In general, while preparations for Ukraine's accession to the EU continue, we must integrate in all possible areas, from customs and energy to food safety. For example, in April, the Cabinet of Ministers adopted the decision in the trade composition which creates the conditions for Ukraine to acquire the regime of the EU internal market in the field of roaming. First Deputy Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee for Transport and Infrastructure, Yulia Klymenko, will elaborate on the importance of the integration of labor markets and promoting our national interest even in the most complicated economical conditions.
As for our perspectives and our prospects, I will just make a reflection from my colleagues and my own opinion. If we won't find the win-win option for Euro integration or integration to the EU, it will be really difficult for us to promote our interests. No matter what and how we say, there will be always Polish farmers who want to sell their products and to just upload that first of all in the Polish ports, not after Ukrainians, even if Ukrainians are paying more. And also they are telling that Ukrainians are driving their roads and they did not give money into the funds that were building, constructing the roads. And they will still have some arguments that will impact the business, and policy is impacting business proportionally, I would like to say. Therefore, together with the Polish colleagues, and let us say that they have 3.5 million Ukrainians, and before they had 9. So if Poland would not have opened the borders and they just let people go to Poland, those who wanted to leave Ukraine, and they also allowed us to export in 2022 a huge number of commodities via their roads, and they provided their infrastructure. So without that, it would have been really difficult for us. And in this direction, we need to understand that the whole humanitarian direction is going via Poland, and Poland is really active, so to say. They are actively supporting us in all our directions of moving to NATO and EU accession. So we have to understand and to take that into account. And it is also coming out of the limitation of transport infrastructure corridors, European corridors, because Europe is not ready for 60 million tons of Ukrainian grain. We are one of the biggest agrarian producers in the region, so for sure we are a serious competitor in products and logistics for local producers, for European producers. We have to accept that, and we have to start promoting our interests, also taking into account this fact. And a lot of European infrastructure are not ready for such amount of Ukrainian export, and they won't be able. So the question is, how can we increase our investments? And I can say that I'm communicating with my colleagues from the parliament, and they are saying everything is wonderful. Now we are investing in the warehouses and ports infrastructure. That's a huge amount of money that have to be taken from the EU budget. It's not simple, and those are huge terminals, and to work with the channels and so on. And they say, okay, what will happen in a year when you win the war? All our infrastructure will won't have enough loads, because these capacities, they won't be necessary, because marine logistics is always the cheapest for agriculture, for any commodities. Marine logistics is always the cheapest, and all the fighting that are happening right now in the world are for marine logistics. So also, they are worried about their expansion of capacities for Ukraine, because they think that it's a temporary thing. And as soon as we return our control over our ports for export, we will stop using their infrastructure and it won't be used to full capacity. So we won't be able to provide some commodities for the European infrastructure. So it's a challenge, and we have to find some way out, and we have to find some kind of win-win option with the Europeans, how we can resolve the situation. As for certain directions, I fully agree that now we need to be integrated. We won't have a second chance of integration and transport infrastructure and agrarian sector and all other things. As soon as the war ends in 1 or 2 years, they will start telling us that you just wait a bit over here, and it's happening always like that, because they will always take care of the interests of their countries and not Ukrainian interests. Second thing is that we also have to understand that we need to have a clear plan of rebuilding related to Euro integration, written in detail, so that Europeans understand actually what we plan.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!